You're listening to the Technology Whisperers with me, Alistair Ross. On today's podcast, I'm with James Little from the DIA, who's the Marketing Development Lead for Digital Identity. Hello there, James.
Thank you, Alistair. Nice to be here, and thank you for having me. It's I jump at any opportunity to talk about this work.
Wonderful. I'm really excited as well. We've got a lot to get through. But first of all, let's just hear a little bit about you. What's your background and how did you get into digital identity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in my current role since the start of the year in January. Market development lead basically means going out and having a lot of conversations like this and discussing digital identity and working with the public and the private sector and lots of conversations. So that's really fun. And then prior to this, I worked for the last government for about 6 years and helped amongst a number of things working on digital policy there. So really exciting. I actually got to help with the passage of the legislation that set us up and then come over to DIA and help to put it into life. So it's pretty rare that you get to do, the high level parliament legislation piece and then come over and actually be responsible for getting the thing going.
So this truly is your baby from inception all the way through.
It kind of has been. Yeah, no, exactly. It kind of has been. And when we were doing it on the other side, through the Beehive process, it was very high level. Sounds great. Cool. Let's do that. Passed it, full support from the House. But now, obviously, we get to get into the weeds and actually turn it from a good idea into something that's real. So that's great. And it utilizes a lot of the same skills, which is taking concepts and ideas and technology that can be sometimes quite complex and explaining it in ways that, the public and key decision makers can go, yes, that's cool. I'm on board. Let's support that.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's listen to this good idea. It's all about digital identity, this time on the Technology Whisperers. What is digital identity and how we shouldn't be afraid of it and how it's going to benefit us throughout the rest of our lives, or maybe at least the next 30 years, right?
That's a good time frame.
Right. Well, let's get into it, shall we? Let's just find out what digital identity is all about, because I've got a feeling I know what digital identity is all about, and I think it's actually quite exciting, quite interesting, and I think, if I'm right, it means quite a lot for the future of New Zealand.
Yeah, well, we think so. That's why we're here doing the work, doing the mahi. I think it's important to say the phrase digital identity can mean a lot. It means a lot of different things. Often the first question I get is, oh, you mean real me? And we'll go into that a bit as well. It can also mean lots of different things in different places. But I guess what I'd like to put to you is that the digital identity we're talking about and the digital identity that we're working on is really about what the future looks like in terms of credentials and assured information and in that kind of space. And as a bit of a preview, I'll tell you, it's very much...
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. It's very much not about central databases or big registries. It's actually much more about giving people their own info back.
Right.
So if you currently think about in the physical world, I don't know if you're carrying a wallet on you.
Sure am. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
You've probably got some cards in there.
Driver's license, the usual credit cards, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so you go and use those, right? Say, you go and buy a bottle of wine and you're looking particularly young today and somebody says, can you prove that you're over 18? You take that document. The person looking at the document knows it's you because there's a photo, and they also know that it's a proper NZTA card because it's got a hologram and they can flex it and it has all those security features. But also, really importantly, NZTA doesn't know that you've done that.
Right.
The person who issued you the credential has no idea you've done that.
And this is with the physical card.
And this is with the physical card today, right? Yeah. We've been trying to tackle this problem in the internet online for like 30 years. There's a really famous quote by one of the architects at Microsoft who says that the internet was not developed with an identity layer. And that was really by design. That was by design. But the problem is, as our lives have been more and more digitized and more online, that's actually become really much a problem.
Yeah.
Now, we've had many attempts at trying to solve this problem, right? The first one was like plain text passwords, on bulletin boards, and highly insecure and also not very usable because it only worked on one website. You go to a different website, you got to do something else.
Different account.
All of different accounts. Yeah. Really insecure too. Massive security risks because you've got honeypots of information, but also you reuse your passwords because you're human. Massive problem. Kind of started to tackle this Web 2.0 a bit. Well, what about federated identity? What about if we have an identity provider and that identity provider kind of holds onto your data for you and helps you out? You can connect to a bunch of different websites and link up that way. And the government got on board with this too. RealMe essentially is a federated identity.
So one system that you can use to authenticate yourself in multiple locations.
Exactly.
One account for a number of services.
Precisely.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Now, that's great. That's definitely an improvement. It's better, but there are still massive problems with it. Does everybody take RealMe or my Google ID or my Facebook ID?
Yep.
Nope.
Right. So you've got pockets of authentication here, there, and everywhere. One with Microsoft, one with Google, one with RealMe.
Precisely. Exactly. Yeah. Also, I'm never actually really sharing my ID. I'm telling somebody else to go and share my ID, which by definition means they're involved every single time.
Yeah. So
coming back to that physical credential, I go buy a bottle of wine at 9 o'clock at night with the physical credential. Nobody knows about that.
Yeah. So NZTA, they don't know that you've shown your ID to the bottler.
Precisely. Because why do they need to? They don't need to know that. And that's the problem with the federated model now. We've got somebody who's not the user, somebody who's not the holder of the information, who's at the center of all the equation. And they're deciding who they can talk to. And they're deciding when your information can be passed along. And they're deciding who it can be passed along to. And they're also keeping tabs on every time you do this.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I guess, they've seen like dystopian movies like The Minority Report, and they're going, hold on, all of this information that's federated is actually going to this central, system somewhere, and somebody's doing something with our data. And then in some states, people are saying they're starting to score us with this data, and that can be really scary.
Exactly. And look, those are the worst case scenarios. Sure. That's bad, absolutely. But you also don't even need to go that far. There are many federated systems out there who are doing a genuine job, but I still don't understand why they need to be in the center of the equation. So that kind of gets you to where we're at, which is essentially a decentralized or a self-sovereign system. And the idea of this goes back to that physical credential. There's some great improvements on it, but it's the same principle, right? I'm an issuer, and I could be a public or a private entity doing that. I issue you a credential. You hold on to the credential, and you use the credential with whoever you want to.
Okay.
So that's the decentralized digital identity, or we just for short digital identity that we're promoting and that we're hoping to see uptake of.
Yep.
And there are a number of benefits, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to go over all of those.
Sure.
But I think the key thing are some of those things that we've touched on with the problems at the start, right? Users at the center with their information, and they're in complete control. It's not somebody else. Really secure, really trusted. For a bunch of reasons, and I'd recommend any listeners with a technical bent get interested into the specs and the standards, because it's really fascinating space. And also that, yes, it's digital, but we're talking about in-person and online use. And that's really important too, because yes, use it online, but also, police officer pulls you over and you need to show your driver's license. That's very much an in-person relation, very much an in-person transaction. Sure. So it's got to be able to work on both ends.
Both ends. Okay, so look, we've talked a bit about the principles of this technology, and we've talked a bit about the framework. I guess we could probably talk a little bit more about that in a moment, and then maybe the technology as well. But in terms of like the brass tacks. So this is the people in the street. We're going from something that says cards, and of course it doesn't necessarily have to replace the cards, but right now the world is using cards, and we're talking about a digital system. So if we just get down for a moment, just to break it down for anybody that's listening and wants to understand what this would look like. I know that right now we may be familiar with some digital identities. I want to say identities, but it also maybe feels a bit more than identities. We use, for example, Apple Pay.
Yep.
We use Google Pay.
Yep.
We had a COVID tracker app
That's
as
right.
well that we used.
Tracer app.
Tracer, sorry.
Tracker, you'll set off warning alarms for some of your audience.
That's right. So we have a few of those systems that we've been used to.
Yeah.
So those are technologies that a lot of people, or a lot of listeners to this, will be familiar with. So how does this technology fit in? What does it look like in the reality? How would it work?
Absolutely. So look, brass tacks, and I love that because I love talking about what this actually looks like. There's only so many PowerPoints and conceptual diagrams you can draw. I think the equivalence, you've touched on it there, that's a really good one, is it's like contactless pay.
Right.
It's like Apple Pay, it's like Google Pay. So in that instance, you have a virtual card, and that resides in a wallet on your phone. You tap the NFC reader on the FPOS terminal, authenticate, bam, done, transfers the funds. This is very similar in terms of a user experience. Technology is a little bit different, and we can touch on that, but the user experience. In the future, I might have in my digital wallet my payment card and my driver's license. And that's great. So when I have an instance where I need to, let's say, prove I'm over 18, again, sadly, hasn't happened too much recently, but, you know.
I've not had here in a long time.
I know, working the long days take a toll on you. Same thing, right? Digital license, tap it. It comes up and says, supermarket wants the following information. Your portrait, over 18. And I go, accept. I have to accept. It beeps over via Bluetooth, to the reader. They get it. They check the signature. It's all good. It's authentic. It's great. Photo, so the person can check that it's me. It says over 18, tick, great.
And so when you say tap it, what are we talking about here? Is it a card? Is it a phone? Is it some other device? What would it look like?
Absolutely. So under most of the standards, it's QR code or NFC. And so that verifier, that could be a smartphone app. That could be an integration into an FPOS terminal. That could be an integration into a point of sale system. That could be a standalone hardware reader. That could obviously, for online presentation, is most likely a QR code on a website that you scan to initiate the transaction. So that verifier, that thing that reads it or receives it, huge wide range of options.
Okay.
To come back to the analogy about the COVID tracer app, not the COVID tracer app, the COVID vaccine pass, the Ministry of Health made available to everybody in New Zealand that verifier app. And you could scan somebody's QR code and it would tell you, yep, this is a legitimate certificate. So it can be as simple as that.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, that legitimate certificate, the verification of identity, is a great part I think, to go on to next. So when we talk about that verification, I think people may be concerned about, well, how does that transaction work? You don't know really truly what goes on in the background with all of this technology. So when we move into this digital world and we start to say potentially goodbye to the old cards and stuff, how do we know about the transaction there? Like you've talked about a moment ago with the federated systems, like I don't want to pick anybody, but Google and Okta and Microsoft and all the rest. If we were to look at the information, the traffic actually flowing on the internet, what we could see with a program like Wireshark, getting technical here, but you could see the data coming down from Microsoft. You could see then you logging in, and then the traffic going back to Microsoft, and then that traffic being federated in some way with the service provider that you actually want, whoever that may be. And so that is that sort of triangle there of traffic. So when we're verifying our identity, which way will, in this proposed system, what way will it work?
So that's a very good point. So there's a couple of reasons here, obviously. You give the credential to the user, but then the user can just edit the text file, and instead of saying age 16, it now says age 19. That's an obvious one, right? We have to have a technology to make sure that we can give a credential to a user, but the user cannot modify that credential, because it's a pretty obvious risk if that was the case. So essentially what happens, and I'll preface this by saying I'm not an expert on cryptography, I'm not an expert on public-private key technology, but I understand it enough to be able to badly describe it. So the credential is signed using public-private key infrastructure. So it's signed with a private key and it's signed with a public key, and then it's
By
given
a certificate authority?
Correct. Yeah. Or by the issuer and a certificate authority. Absolutely. And then that credential is provided to the user. So the user's got it in their phone. So that's James walking down Lambton Quay with the credential in his phone, which is signed. The relying party, the verifier, the person who wants to receive that information, has access to the public key. Yeah. It's a public key. That's the entire point, right? And so they have that public key built into their verifier. And when James comes along and he taps his credential, and it's a trusted credential, and the verifier has downloaded the public key of the credential, it checks the credential, checks it against the public signature, and it can tell if the credential's been tampered with or not. So, if it's not tampered with, then great. Bing, green box, good to go. So
in that whole transaction there, where has the information flown? Has it come, is it a two-way thing? Is it a three-way thing?
So the credential was always issued to the user. The user holds it, right? So that's the first time. That's the issuance. It happens once.
One time.
It happens once, unless you lose it and you have to have it reissued. But think about it like the physical credential, right? It's issued to you one time. You get it one time. It resides on your phone. Most of the time, good security practice, it will literally sit in the secure ROM chip on your phone. The level of the phone that's so secure that even the operating system kind of can't get to.
Read-only, cannot be accessed,
read-only, cannot be accessed, cannot be modified, all of that kind of stuff. It does not sit in the cloud. It does not sit on a network somewhere. It does none of those things. It sits on your phone. And this is a real paradigm shift, right? The last 15, 20 years, it's been cloud this, network that, connect to this. So it's crazy to think that the equivalent of a text file, because it is. It's a text file sitting on your phone. That's it. It's the only place it resides, right? In your digital wallet. Then you go down the street and you say, I want to buy a bottle of wine. And this is obviously in person. Online is online and networks. But in person, you tap the verifier. It's generally an encrypted end-to-end Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connection between the devices. And the way you can prove that this isn't a database lookup or something, and we do this every time, is we turn the phone with the credential on, we turn the phone with the verifier, we put both on flight mode. And then we do the verification there and then. And you go, great, look, it's here. Because the verifier downloaded the public key 2 weeks ago.
And so where does the verifier get that public key from? Because that public key has got your public key on it, right?
So the public key's got all issuers. So if it's DIA, then that's the public key for all credentials issued by DIA. You don't have one credential for James and one certificate for James and one certificate for...
So it's like a chain of certificates.
Precisely. And it works exactly the same way that our e-passports work. So you might be aware of this. Some of your listeners might not be. But, most times when you go to the airport and you present your passport officer's really not looking at the physical passport. They're immediately putting it on the scanner, which is reading the chip inside the passport, and they're reading the signed information inside of there, which they check against the DIA public key to make sure that DIA did issue that passport. So it's exactly the same thing there. So, the ability to switch both devices on flight mode, no internet connectivity, and demonstrate literally these two devices are passing information encrypted between each other. It's not a database lookup. It's not a network connection. It's none of that, is really impressive. And same thing for when you do an online presentation. So, let's say I'm trying to prove, let's say I'm in Australia and I'm trying to prove I'm over 16 years old to be able to sign up for social media, which is
very topical.
Which is the next, topical choice. Same thing. If I'm using, for instance, a mobile digital driver's license to do that, the interaction's happening between the certificate on my device and is being passed along to the website as part of the verification process. It's not pinging back to the issuer to then provide the information to, or pinging back to a federated service. It's literally going from a presentation of it's going from my wallet to that website, and the website's doing the exact same thing. Check it against the public key. Good to go.
And do they get a copy of your private information?
So and this is a good point. You get a credential, but you're only providing a presentation. So again, lots of analogies, but I think it helps people sort of visualize it. In the physical world, you get a credential, But instead of passing along the credential again, because that's risky, right? You pass along your driver's license, the bouncer steals it. Not a lot you can do.
Yeah.
Instead, you're passing along a presentation, which is only including the information you need out of that credential, not all of it, and is also in a format that can't be unused. So, that's really useful in the security space because you don't have replay attacks or kind of that sort of thing. It's kind of the equivalent of, the JP writing a copy of the driver's license and signing it at the bottom and saying, here you go.
Yeah.
I've seen it. So you're going, it's great. The information is just as assured as ever, but I can't unuse this. I can't pretend to unuse it as a credential. It's not a credential. It's kind of a temporary copy of that credential.
So in terms of if we are using this technology on mobile phones, say, the mobile phones that we're used to these days, we've gotten better and better at security as the phones has progressed.
Yeah.
So, for example, these days, most of us are using biometric logins to our phones. We either use our fingerprints or we use our eyes, and it's in combination with a pen or something like that as well. Yeah. So the security standards of these devices are getting better.
Yeah.
Would the release of this information from the device be in tandem with those security controls?
That's right. So part of the standards and part of the rules under the regime that we implement requires every transaction an authenticator to be used in order to permit that transaction.
Okay.
So when the credential gets issued to you the first time, it has to be connected to an authenticator. So that might be a biometric, might be a password, might be passkey, it could be any kind of authenticator, right? Biometrics are really good ones, especially on the phone because it's so easy and quite secure comparatively. So you get that connected at the point of issuance. Then every time you want to use that, you have to use that same authenticator. So I connect, the driver's license comes to me, connect that with my biometric, my Face ID, because I have an iPhone, or my Touch ID, and then every time I use the credential, I have to use that again too, because otherwise you run into the problem of, I'll just pick up my mate's phone and use that to buy a bottle of wine online.
Gotcha.
Sort of a classic example, right? Or I've lost my phone and I don't want anybody who picks it up to be able to use any of those credentials.
Yeah.
And that's really important because you think some of those credentials you want to hold really securely, right? Imagine a world, in the future, police issue a firearms license, right? Now, police go through this incredibly rigorous process to vet you and then provide you with a firearms license. And then you could just lose your wallet one day, and it's whoever picks it up's kind of got it. So, having that authenticator is really important because, anybody who's been through this knows this. You lose your phone, it's bricked. Trying to get into a phone that you pick up off the street's near impossible. Yeah. And so that's also a really important security.
So what are the implications then if you lose your phone and that is your digital identity as well? Because it's bad if you lose your driver's license and your wallet because then you have to go to get all your cards replaced. You have to go to the AA to get your driver's license again or NZTA. Yeah. So what's the process with the phone situation as well?
Well, again, it's quite similar to that physical, right? You lose the credential, it's gone. Now, the benefit is it's generally easier to reissue, right? So reissuance might be logging into the website, redoing a biometric to check against, them going, it's definitely you, and then reissuing it to your new digital wallet. Yeah. So it's not painless, but it's kind of the trade-off, right? Well, we could put all your credentials in the cloud, but then you kind of, once again, running into those problems that we're trying to address with this. Yeah. And I'd say as long as you don't lose your phone more than once every 6 months or so.
Well, I know people.
then it's probably not going to be too painful. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, that's absolutely a point. But
fair enough. And so a moment ago, you mentioned the word standards, right? Now, I'm aware that New Zealand, through the DIA, have created a standard framework here. But you also mentioned international use. You mentioned like at the passport border and so forth. So when the DIA devised of this platform or this framework or this technology or combine it all into whatever, were you considering standards or international standards in this? And if the answer is yes, what does that look like? And what's the interplay around the world?
Yeah. So the short answer is absolutely. The worst thing we could have done is created a digital identity space in New Zealand and then said, we're going to build an incredibly bespoke product that nobody else in the world's ever heard of or will be able to interact with. There's two problems to that. Nobody else in the world will ever interact or operate with us, and we will do it worse than we would have otherwise been able to.
Sure.
So our framework is very much based on international standards. If you think about the process, how do I prove I am who I am to an issuer first and foremost? That's covered by the New Zealand identification standards, and that's kind of a process of like, how do you check a person is who they claim to be, and how do you know information is good, and that sort of thing. And so that's covered by a New Zealand standard, but it's largely high level and quite similar to other international ones. But then at the technology, once you get past that into the technology, we're based entirely on international standards. The two key international standards in development at the moment, one is from the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, and they produce a verifiable credential model. And that is the technology that creates these certificates, these credentials. That's largely about online application. So online use, which is kind of what you'd expect from W3C. And it's also very flexible. And there's a bit of a trade-off with flexibility and interoperability. You got lots of flexibility, you got less interoperability. So yes, the credentials the same, but a lot of those things about how you present it and issue it are different. And also simple things like what are the attributes in it? And if you think about what are the keys and values in it, right? Like, is it name? Is it given name? Is it first name? Is it those really tangible kind of things?
So your database over here looks like name,
Precisely.
and then the other one says given name.
And this one says first name, and then this one says names, and then it's like, okay, so lots of flexibility, less interoperability, because you have to wade through some of that stuff. And there are solutions to it, but I think that's a fair summary. So you can do lots with that. Then on the other side, and we've really seen probably taking the lead this year, I think it's fair to say, is ISO, so the International Organization of Standardization, or whatever. It's French. There's a French name in there somewhere too. So ISO, everybody knows ISO.
Yeah.
The international body, and they basically started this work by developing the standard for mobile driver's licenses, and they have just started releasing for what they describe as mobile documents. So basically, a wider application. So it could be a photo ID, it could be any kind of ID. They've kind of gone the other side, where they've said actually interoperability is kind of more important than flexibility. There's still a reasonable amount of flexibility, but we think interoperability is really the most important thing. And so those standards, and that's essentially where almost all jurisdictions are issuing their mobile driver's license. They're all under that standard. And that's really great, because you can imagine a situation where in the future New Zealand issues a driver's license to that standard, but so do all of the states in Australia. And so you could go to the Woolworths in Sydney and your mobile driver's license would work the same as somebody coming from Sydney with the New South Wales driver's license would work here in Auckland or Wellington at the Woolworths, because they're all built on the same standards. And that's also really important. And I know the mobile driver's license is a really small subset of all the things you could do, but it's the most tangible one right now. Yep. We've already got rental car companies in New Zealand who are having people walk in with their mobile driver's licenses going, here you go, I want to rent a car.
From other countries.
From other countries,
right.
Often from the US or from Australia.
What I was going to ask is, is New Zealand effectively, because these standards are so new, is New Zealand a trailblazer in this regard? But it sounds like, no, there's other countries or other states
precisely.
that are doing this.
So, for instance, in Australia, currently only Queensland, but New South Wales is quickly switching over, and all the other jurisdictions will as well. In the US, I think 12 states already issued to the standard, another 12 due to come online next year.
Right.
The European Union, who has set up this huge set of regulations which come into effect in 2026 and basically set up digital identity for the entire continent, same standards. Same implementations
Brilliant.
of the same standards. And that will be, 500 million people?
Yeah.
And some of the leading economies, and the largest economic bloc in the world, 2026, they come into effect.
Great.
And so because of, just like the internet, because of the use of these shared standards, I was playing with the European Union reference wallet today, scanned it with a completely different hardware reader, bing, worked straight away.
That's super. And so that framework that we in New Zealand, or the DIA, that was that came into accordance this year, right?
Yeah,
in 2024,
right.
It was like June or July or something.
Yeah,
was
that's
it?
right, 1st of July.
And so what was your particular involvement with that?
Yeah. My particular involvement is largely doing this kind of stuff, right? Is getting people excited about the work.
Yeah.
I don't get given the green stamp to accredit, providers. But my job's to work both in the public and the private sector to talk about what this is and the direction we're going in and what this could look like. And I think, really interesting to point out the reason we accredit issuers is because with all this technology and these open standards and all of this stuff, anybody can create a credential, right?
Yeah, like public and private, any corporation.
Public or private, but me going home tonight, some open standards, I could issue a credential to myself and say that I'm 1,200 years old and I live on the moon. And the credential would be fine, right? It'd be signed by an issuer. It would be up to the standard, all of those things. But it's clearly not from a trusted source. Yeah. So the job we do in DIA is to, our part of DIA is to essentially accredit providers who want to be accredited to say, these guys are trustworthy, the credentials they create are trustworthy.
So you have to then, am I correct in saying, go through a process of vetting? So whether it be, I'd like to think that regardless of whether you're a public entity, a government entity, or whether you're private, corporate, you have to go through a process of verification that you are who you say you are, you're trustworthy, and so there's a process already in place for that.
That's exactly it. So that's the accreditation process, and you really touched on it. We're agnostic as to whether that's public or private. So that could be a business, that could be iwi, it could be an NGO, or yes, it could be a public agency. And there are plenty of examples in all of those. And we go through and we do an accreditation process. We say, how do you manage identification management? Like, how do you know the information you're giving to people is their information? Where are you getting the information from? How are you checking that it's their information before you give it to them? Then we go do a privacy assessment. We're saying, have you got a good privacy impact assessment? Are you privacy preserving? Are you looking after the privacy of your users? And then thirdly, and key to this podcast, security assessment. When you say you're doing end-to-end encryption, are you doing end-to-end encryption? What is the private public key infrastructure only works if the public key is really public and the private key is incredibly private. So how are you managing those keys? And all of those kind of things. And then if you get through all of those tests and we accredit you, and there's a really pretty stamp you can see on our website that indicates that you are a trusted provider of services.
So it adds a real air of legitimacy to the bearers of the certificate.
Exactly right. So if you're a relying party, if you're a bank who's accepting some digital credentials, you're not going to want to just trust any random credential that somebody found off the internet. But if the credential comes with that big green stamp and you can verify that's the case, you go.
I mean, getting a new business account, is quite an onerous process these days. Just walking into a bank, you can't just say, "Hey, I'm Joe Blogs," and get an account, right? You have to go through an awful lot of that verification process for good reason. But it is onerous. It's onerous on anybody, and it sometimes takes days or weeks. It's getting to that point now, and so if we're adding this, it's potential for the end user to have less complexity, because you've got this thing that says, I am who I say I am, and it's backed by this chain of evidence. So ultimately all that, scanning of documents, sending them in, coming to the branch, all of that could potentially be done away with?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think, the way to say it is that it should only be painful once.
You're right.
You know? Yes, you need to go through that process to prove you are who you are and make sure that you're the right person and all of those things. But once you've done that and it's been encapsulated as a credential, you should be able to go and use that really easily. and that could be online or in person. So, we've all been through this. I just went through the house selling and house buying process this year. And the number of times I had to download 7 PDFs of my pay slip and my bills and send them to somebody and give them far too much information, and physically walk into the lawyer's office because that was the only way they could do their AML compliance, and they took a photocopy of my passport.
Yeah.
It's
really onerous and old school almost.
It's a really painful process, and we know that there are easier ways to do that.
So you mentioned something just there about the release of data. Just with your example there with going to a house viewing. And so you're giving away, obviously you have to give them your name, you have to give them your email address, but do you need to give them your date of birth? Do you need to give they're asking for all of this other information, which ultimately should never really go to these individuals, right? So you should feel in control of your own data. And so when this goes to a digital format, that should be even more so. And I would like to think that we would be able to release only the information which we feel comfortable doing. So how does this technology, and not just this technology, but the framework itself, how does this enable us to have control over our own data release?
Absolutely. So, it's principally enabled by the technology, which is that when you receive a request, it has to specifically ask you for what attributes it's requesting, and then you have to specifically agree to provide that. So, that example of buying the bottle of wine, the only 2 bits of information that are useful in that instance is whether or not you're over 18 and if it's in person, your photo. So I can check to make sure that it's roughly you. None of that other information is relevant. From a legal perspective as well, the law says check they're over 18. That's all it says. It doesn't say look at their whole certificate.
They don't even need your date of birth.
No, they don't.
They just need a marker to know what age you are.
And so, coming back to the driver's license standard, within that, some of the attributes are markers: over 18, over 21, over 65. Not your date of birth. So you don't even need to provide your date of birth. You just need to provide the fact that you're over 18. And so that's really important. And I kind of, to emphasize the point, I say, why does the bouncer in Courtney Place need your residential address?
100%.
They don't. And you shouldn't be providing it. And now you genuinely have a way to not provide it while still providing the information they do need.
That's great. So I envisage it kind of like, how these days smartphone apps, the apps themselves are getting a lot better, or the operating system like Android and Apple OS are getting much better at asking you for permission about what it does. So for example, if the app claims it needs permission to your location, it has to, there's no way around it. It's guarded. The operating system is guarding it and saying this application, whatever it may be, Twitter or whatever, is it requesting to know your location? And you're like, well, I just want to post tweets and want to read tweets. I don't want it knowing what my location is. So you can say no. So the same sort of technique is going on here with the identity?
That's exactly it. So for the wallet to work, for the wallet to be able to be accredited, the wallet has to confirm the exact information that it's providing and get consent from you, and then check that authenticator again. So you have to do the biometric, or you have to plug the password in again before that's transmitted. So, and that's really important, and that's really great. It's funny, the other night I was talking to my wife about this, and she just has kind of no real particular interest in the stuff that I find interesting. And so I showed her this. I showed this to her end to end, and I said, "Isn't it cool? Like it's encrypted Bluetooth and yada 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 yada." And the thing she took away was, "That's really cool that you could just provide some of the info." Like that was her takeaway. She didn't care about any of the technology, and 100% of your listeners, but 95% of the people walking down, the street aren't going to care about the technology. But it is stuff like that they're going to care about, and they're going to think is really cool. And they're going to go, why am I giving the bouncer my residential address? And
I have spoken to people about that particular thing recently, and everybody hates that. Everybody. There is not one person that says, hold on, I'm okay with providing all this data to this person that clearly does not need it. So I think that it's a really empowering thing. So there are going to be certain killer apps, we call it, right, for this technology that will win people over, and it will be different for different people.
Exactly.
And I think, we touched on it earlier, and I think hopefully you've pretty much already satisfied those concerns. But I think, the biggest problem people have when thinking about this technology and the frameworks that go along with it is there's Big Brother watching me somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, I think that you've done a good job already of putting people's minds at ease.
Yeah.
And that would always be my, being a security guy, I wear the tinfoil hat, a little bit more than a lot, but there's for good reason, because there is so much oversharing of information on the internet. And so is there anything else that you can think of that you would say?
Well, look, I think absolutely. So you're a security expert, so I'll send you a copy of the standards and you'll read over it and you'll be like, oh yeah, no, okay, this all makes sense. So I understand that. But that's not going to be the way that most people understand it. And I think it's fair to say there's a large cohort of New Zealanders who'll go, oh, you mean I can get my my Super Gold card or my bank ID or my driver's license on my phone? Great, super convenient. Like, it's not going to be super exciting, but it's just going to be really useful and convenient. I'm realistic. I don't think anybody, except for maybe me and the team, are going to be skipping down Courtney Place going, I forgot my first digital credential. Woo!
I'm going to be there, James. When that day comes.
You can film it. We might be, because we've been working on this for years, but most people are not going to be. But for most people, it's just going to be like more convenient, just more useful, and underneath that, more secure and more privacy enhancing. And the Apple Pay, the Google Pay, the contactless pay, that's a really good example, right? I don't think anybody was seriously like, whoa, this is going to change my life. This is amazing. I've now got a card on my phone. But you go to a cafe, 50, 60, 70% of people tap, and it's just, life's simpler and more straightforward. And also, using those technologies safer and more secure. It's much harder to try to rip off one of those credit cards than it was when credit cards were physical things and you did this with a zapping machine to take a copy of it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those benefits that people won't see. They won't see that their identity hasn't been stolen since they started using this, but that is obviously a benefit.
So obviously you're really pumped up about this. This is a great thing in your eyes. In terms of success and measuring success, what will that look like for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, to come back to doing cartwheels, down the street, I think the first metric will be I've actually got a credential on my phone and I can actually use it, because we've been talking about it for a long time, seen it happening in other places. Because I work in this, I have like 7 wallets, all with fake credentials in them for demonstration purposes, but not a single one of those is legitimate. So I think the first time I have a legitimate one in my phone that I can use, for me, that'll be a success. But I think more importantly, what it will be a success for New Zealanders is a couplefold. It'll be life's easier, life's more convenient. I'm not skipping down the street, but things are just, much easier. I don't have to carry a wallet on me, that would be great. Technically, by law, you still have to carry your driver's license probably in your wallet whenever you drive. And I know a lot of people who don't carry a wallet anymore. So it's probably, a lot of people who are questionably in the law there. So that, there's one thing that's just making life easier. But also the thing I'd really like to see is kind of breaking that monopoly of the government as the only source of truth, I'm really looking forward to seeing that iwi issued credential that says, this person is this and they're affiliated with this iwi. And that's a trusted document. And that could be used, for purposes that it's not currently. Or your bank ID. The bank does a lot of work to prove you are who you are. There's no reason why they can't issue a credential. So I think just convenience and opening up more opportunities and for, those kind of examples. And then, greater security, greater privacy, less reading the newspaper to find out 30 million people's identities have been hacked because somebody had, the master database had the password 1234 on it.
And so that's the whole point, right? If we weren't clear on that, I think the whole point is that there is no central database of these credentials anywhere. The credentials are stored on your device or whatever it may be, but they're yours and yours alone. And then if you do lose it, then you have to go back all the way to the start. But same with any paper or card.
Yeah, precisely. And arguably easier than that, but certainly no harder. And because there is no single source for the hackers to come for. There's not, there's not a big database where I've photocopied a bunch of people's passports and put them in there in a Dropbox that doesn't have a very good password on it, and oh bugger, now it's all gone, and and we are all familiar with those stories. So it's not nirvana. It's just life being more convenient, more secure, and more privacy enhancing.
Wonderful. Look, I want to thank you so much, James. Do you have any last parting words about it?
I don't think so. I didn't fully answer your question, so I'll finish that off. And you said, what about people who are skeptical? And I think this is a really important point. I sort of said, large bunch of people who find this really convenient, and they might download in the first week or the first month or the first year, and they'll generally get on board. Then there are a subset who are skeptical, and I think some of them probably, no matter what you say, they're going to be really hard to convince, right? Sure. There will be a big chunk there, though, who are just genuinely skeptical. I mean, what's that old adage that technology that you can't understand looks like magic, or is indistinguishable from magic? And so, they're probably not downloading it the first week or the first month or the first year. But a lot like other things, when they see other people use it over and over and over, there's no issue, there's no major security issue, and government's not tracking them or big banks not tracking them, then maybe they'll go, oh, actually, you know what, this is probably okay. And, it's not connected to the internet, it's just from my wallet to you and vice versa. Okay, then, maybe I'm more comfortable with this. And I think also sometimes the phrase digital identity sounds scary, but when you say to somebody, hey, would it be useful to have your driver's license or your university degree or your super gold card or your passport in a digital wallet on your phone? People are like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not scary either.
Yeah, that's right. It's demystifying the technology, demystifying the language around it does help. So that's what this podcast is all about, really, isn't it?
Exactly.
Okay, then last, kind of got my brain thinking there a little bit more. It's obviously, you're skipping down a street thinking of a couple of years from now, right? And I guess that would be because you found out that people are now using it.
Yeah.
To get people using it, you have to obviously bring suppliers, vendors, public entities on board.
Yeah.
How obviously if we've been negative days up until June before the framework came across. Yeah. Now we have the framework. Now the technology exists.
Yeah.
What are we actually going to have to do other than sort of outreach like this sort of thing? Yeah. What are we going to have to do to get these vendors? We've got a process obviously to get them on board.
Yeah.
But what are we actually going to do to make this turn into a reality, to make the technology and the policy around it be brought into life?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a real chicken and egg problem, and this is sort of my entire life is discussing chicken and egg problems. You're absolutely right. We've got the regulatory regime, we've got the technology. Those two things are there. So what we need is we need people who have information to issue it, we need users who want to use it, and we need relying parties who want to receive it. So our work at the Department of Internal Affairs here is kind of work on all three of those fronts. And we're doing a lot of thinking, and we're doing a lot of writing, and providing a lot of advice to very important people, and talking to other agencies, and really talking to the private sector as well, to try to get all of those bits to come up at the same time, right? Because, you need them all to come up at the same time. If I offer you a credential, but you don't have a digital wallet, it's pointless. If I offer you a credential and you do have a digital wallet, but nobody accepts it, also useless. If you have a digital wallet and somebody will accept it, but there's nobody handing out credentials, doesn't work again. So we're really tackling all of those. And I can't go into total detail on a public podcast, but what I would say is I'm really optimistic that all of those bits are getting addressed, and that I think, genuinely in the next 12, 18, 24 months, New Zealanders will start to see it live, and over the next wee while that it'll really grow. The final thing I say is I'm impatient. I always want the stuff to go faster. I want the credential on my phone today. You can probably see it in the way I talk. But I also have to remind myself, we didn't nail identity for the first 30 years of the internet or widespread adoption of the internet. We're setting this up for the next 30 years. Yeah. So yes, I want it done today, but also if we get this right, if we get the basic design right, if we get the trust right, this could be how we do it for the next 30 years.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, wonderful. All right, well, thanks, James. I really appreciate your time today. It's been really great to hear all about this. And, from where I'm sitting, I think you've got a convert. I think,
Excellent.
and it's quite hard to get me one over on these
Yeah.
sorts of things. So I think that the technology certainly sounds easy to use,
Yeah.
and from what I've read before coming along for the podcast, the framework sounds well intended.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like you've got all of the big ticket scary aspects of it done well. So yeah, thanks again for your time, and yeah.
Thank you, and we'll record a special version of the podcast when we are doing cartwheels down Whitney Place.
Hopefully that's not too long. I know you're impatient, but let's just hope it's sooner rather than later.
Excellent. Thank you for having me on.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.